ASMR video outside, ASMR in the car, which is also a YouTuber, by the way. I haven't heard from him in a while. So I just wanted to make another quick video outside talking about just a few things in a relaxing style. First, I thought that it would be interesting if I made another random facts video, another video regarding details about how the internet works and stuff like that, just things like that in general. I thought that would be really cool. So, you seem to like that previous video. A lot of people said it was very entertaining and interesting to see random facts being stated. I'm really going to have to get another phone. The one I've been using is just not dependable to work at all anymore, so I'm having to record with something completely different. Alright, but I would like to do a random facts thing. So, back to the internet topic. So a lot of people, when they are, like, for example, when you select this video on your phone or tablet or whatever you're selecting it on, for example, say if you're at home and you select this video, when you touch it, a lot goes into play. No one's thinking about the microprocessors, the internal processors of the phone, the finger sensors, and no one's thinking about all of the microscopic process going on in the phone. And I mean, it should be a given, but no one thinks about it, and the complexity of what's going on, and just from the motherboard to the microcircuits to the microprocessors to all of the stuff going on inside of it. Now, when every device has an IP address, an internet protocol, and that IP is 192.168.1. Whatever, a bunch of numbers afterwards. And when you select this video, for example, and you select it, you touch the screen, and you've selected that video, it's sending out the request that you made and taking what you selected, sending your request from along with the device's IP address, which is like a mailing address, for example. Like when you mail a letter or anything that you mail, when you send something in the mail, the post office has to know that the home address or the address to and from, where it's coming from and where it's going. And inside that letter are the packets of the contents. And the same applies when you select a video. You've selected it on the device with this particular IP address, 192.16. Blah, 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 blah. And those codes, those numbers, along with the link to the video that you have selected, is sent. Now, when you're streaming, it's a lot more complex. I mean, there's a lot of complexity in it. So what's happening is you're taking that little bit of data there of the video you selected, and it's breaking down the information into packets of data, and it's breaking it into zeros and ones, basically, because all of the devices we use currently, which, by the way, the time would not even function without tiny quartz crystals. Quartz actually keeps time. And all of the devices we use binary code. Many of you know that already. A series of zeros and ones that make that command possible. So it takes that video code, it sends that request out through an electromagnetic frequency. Now, most of the general routers use 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz. There's recently been an upgrade to a higher frequency, but most of the ones on the market are generally 2 and 4 right now. 2.4 and 5, I mean. And so, usually about like the dual band, usually 802.11n. Most of the routers that I've seen are 802.11 B, G, and N, typically. That's pretty much the standard. But it's actually getting higher, and the higher it goes, the faster the router is, basically. But Wi-Fi 6 is now taking hold, but I don't have that. But I've got a router that is the Asus. No, Asus was my other one. The previous router was Asus. This one is a Netgear router, Netgear Nighthawk that I set up. But when you select that video, it sends it out in a wavelength, in either 2.4, which has more of it's got more of a wavelength, or 5 gigahertz. Now 5 gigahertz has more interference, but as long as you're closer to 5 gigahertz, if you're using that particular bandwidth, you're good if you're closer, and there's not a lot of interferences. Now, when you use 2.4, then it sends that video request and the packets of data in the form of a wavelength of electromagnetic frequency. Then once it gets to the router, the firewall or protection kicks in and all of that, and says whether it's okay to send it back, send that data. Then it breaks it down into codes, then sends it through the Ethernet port, basically into the fiber optics cable input. Then it sends it through your network cable system. It goes out of the router in pulses of light. So that data that was an electromagnetic frequency and was a bunch of numbers to make the request that you selected, it then breaks it down into light and pulses of light. And those light impulses are what runs the fiber optics or optical fiber cables. That's what those tiny fibers, remember those things you used to play with as a child or whatever, that had these little fibrous lights and fibers, and the lights were at the end. That's how that information now travels. Upon research, they found that that information and packets of data travel faster over light than they do over copper wires, which before, with the DSL phone lines and dial-up and all the old classic landline phone lines, we always used copper wiring and DSL, depending on that. Well, it became faster. Very few places still use that DSL or copper wiring, but it still exists here and there. But they're phasing it out mostly. Then that data goes through that router, and it sends it out as pulses of light, travels all across your country, all across the country, and then sometimes, in some cases, all across this world. If you're accessing an Australian site or a British site or somewhere else, it goes into a system of cables that are underground, and through cables on poles in cities, and then it goes into these underwater cables. There are what's it called? There are these underwater cables, and I guess they're submarine cables, basically, that they're very thick. They're about as thick as a Coke can or Mountain Dew can. So the fiber optics cables are actually extremely tiny. They're probably like that, maybe even smaller, and there's thousands of them in that tiny little section like this. And that information that travels as pulses of light can go all across those under the ocean, and they occasionally have to have repairs done to them, and it can sometimes shut off entire areas of the internet. But it then sends it all across this world, finds its way. First of all, though, the first thing it's got to do once it goes out of your house is go through the cables, go through the electric pole, which is the network poles, the network poles, then goes through those fiber optics cables that are on the lines, then go to I got ahead of myself earlier, but it goes to your local internet service provider. And from there, they switch it, basically, whether it's okay or not. Then it goes to their local distributors, basically. It kind of distributes it out to the information out to those rest of the fiber optics cable, the networks that I talked about. Then it switches out and goes to the servers that it's looking for. Like, it could be at the data centers that you see. It could be the servers housing the data centers where you see like Google data centers or social media platforms data centers or whatever. There are multiple data centers, and just as you have a hard drive or micro SD card, those hard drives house the data that you're using right now, what you're watching, and it goes into a whole other network system when you're using a mobile phone or hotspot for a tablet and you're using the phone as a hotspot like a router on the go. It does the same principles basically do apply, but it's going through the cellular networks instead of using the just all the land cables basically. But what's happening is it then takes that data that you requested. That request goes all the way to that particular server house, the house servers basically, and then the video you requested is found on the best possible server. If one's down, it switches to another, or to another, to another, and then takes that video request and sends a constant stream of it back to you. So where I've uploaded this video to my channel, it actually stores it on my YouTube channel in servers just like it would in a hard drive. But it's on hard drives, but it's on the data center hard drives. And they have to check those every so often. They said they have done repairs to them at one Google data center. They've done repairs up to 5 times in the past 6 years. So basically, they have to repair these data centers' server hard drives all the time, or data just would not work. Sometimes they have to crush them completely. But after it gets where it's going, finds the request, then okays it, it reverses that process and sends it right back through those all across this world, all across the country. Impulses of light go back to the DNS all the way across the to your data center, just from the data centers and the servers, goes to your ISP or local internet service provider, goes back to the cables, back to the cable to your house, into the router, and then sends it back as electromagnetic frequency, and then your device pulls up the video, and a bunch of other technological processes take place inside the device. But a lot of people don't even think about the fact of the complexity when you're on a phone and you're making a phone call and you're talking. Your voice is then broken down into codes, and it's like the antenna takes your voice, breaks it down into these codes, and then it has to do that reverse process on the other end of the other person's phone. And it has to continue to connect to cell tower after cell tower after cell tower after cell tower. And whenever you're on the phone and you're talking, it has to connect to, like, there are blocks basically of cell towers that transmit that signal to you. And it's got to give a constant stream back and forth where, if you're talking in, I think they call it this, like, standard audio, I can't remember, or HD audio. HD voice is now basically the standard. Otherwise, it sounds bad. And with their upgrading from 3G to 4G LTE, only 4G LTE and 5G instead of 3G. The 3G phones sound, if you still use one, sound more muffled, but every once in a while because those networks are being shut down. But it's like it has to transfer your voice from electromagnetic frequency into an audio that you can hear. Basically, when you're talking, transfers it, and then it transfers it into code. Then it transfers it back on the other end of the other person's phone, and no one thinks about how complex it is, really. But anyway, yeah. The internet actually got started back in I think it was the 1960s, and they were these two universities in California were trying to send a message to each other, and they were trying to send a message that said log in. So all they actually got from one university computer to another, which that's what the internet is it's a series of computers. Even this tablet that I'm using and then the device you're using, it's a computer with an internet protocol address, IP address, and then it's each device is then connected to the network of networks, or it used to be known as like M2M, machine to machine technology. And when they first invented that, like I stated, when they first got it online, it was called the intranet. The intranet then later became known as the internet. And actually, on my birthday, August 3rd, 1994, was the big pioneering of the internet, um, when I was born. And so the internet became a worldwide means of information. And it started out where they could store information from libraries better. Basically, like a giant library. Used to, I remember when I was younger, even, they still had where you could go into a computer at the library and view newspapers. And it was newspaper archives, kind of like Google Newspaper Archives is now, but yet you could actually view the newspapers on there. They had digitized their books and their papers, and you could view them that way, and it was a big deal before the internet was like so common. Then it was only AOL at the time, America Online, then Yahoo. I heard that all the time, Yahoo, and You've Got Mail was a big deal on TV. You heard that all the time, and people would pay outrageous prices to have internet for like an hour. Go dial-up sound. Kevin James did that on King of Queens, by the way. This is a vapor inhaler, by the way. I just had that in my hand. But yeah, it became, I went off track again. But the intranet was basically designed for easier and quicker access to information. And they put it online, so to speak. And then from one university to the other, they tried to transfer information with the first message through these, at the time, through these network cables, through the internet, from one machine to the other. And one computer messaged to another LO. It was supposed to say login. So the first message ever sent was almost LOL, which used to mean lots of love, but now it means laugh out loud. But yeah, the first computer sent a message to the other computer in two different universities in California, miles apart, and it said LO. So that was the first actual message. It was a login message saying they had achieved login, but it didn't all go through. Then it went from there, and then later AOL, Yahoo, and then Google officially became the most common search engine in around 2007, and then took off from there. And then they came out with multiple smartphones. The iPhone came out, and then Google phones like the Motorola Atrix, which was my first phone, my first smartphone. I had an LG Shine flip phone. Originally, I had a track phone, which had a little bitty screen on it, and then I went from that track phone, MP3 players, to the LG Shine flip phone, over to the Motorola Atrix, which was a small smartphone. Then I had the Galaxy S4, and then my Galaxy S5. So, yeah. And then now they have the S21 Ultra, and coming out next year, the S22. It's just, I don't care for some of the nefarious directions that the technology's heading. There needs to be security in place before they do what they've done, because of the nefarious purposes and the dark individuals taking over and being ahead of it. That I don't care for. I mean, it could be positive or negative. You can have the greatest implications with it, or you can use it for negative. The too many is being used for negative, but it's the instant access of information. It's someone commented to me, it's like a digital library, basically, is what it is. And your information is housed in data centers, data servers that are in portable, these hard drives. And hold on, the vehicle light went off. But basically, it's stored in different hard drives everywhere. And truthfully, the cloud, as it's called, is just a network of networks. Computers comprised of hard drives in servers everywhere, just in various places. And people don't think about, like when they put a debit card in or use a card, and it's got to communicate with the business that you're putting the terminal that you put the card in has got to create the card's got to create an individual code from that chip. Then it goes to the bank. The bank has to create an individual code. Those two codes have to come back and match. Otherwise, the transaction's voided. It won't work. And it has to say you have sufficient funds that will be transferred to this particular merchant. And the merchant's bank or teller, the merchant's place that they get their money from, that holds their money, has to say, okay, yes, it's going to, this transaction was approved or will be. And then it has to send that code back to your bank and say, all right, this has been taken out, funds have been taken or will be taken. And if it goes to credit servers, it takes up to 48 hours. Like when some people pay phone bills, like AT&T, over the phone, like we've done in the past, it goes through credit servers. So then you're like, oh my goodness, the bank did not take it out immediately, so now that messes me up for a couple of days because I expected a certain amount in there and then it comes out later. That's because it goes through credit servers sometimes when you're calling over the phone, which routes through Georgia when you're calling AT&T because that's where their data centers are. So it routes that through Georgia, and that's who takes care of it. And that's kind of confusing when they do that, but some companies pay the bills through a credit servers, and those credit servers take longer than debit card servers. So and then after you do that transaction, for example, if you're using MasterCard servers also have to approve it. So you're using them. No one thinks about, like, if they're paying through PayPal or CashApp. If you're paying through PayPal and your MasterCard debit card is linked through that, which I never usually use PayPal in the store, but if you did, it's so complex. You're using a digital form of cash, of currency, but it might be taken by direct deposit to your bank. Your bank then approves it, and then if you're fortunate enough to have the funds there, I prefer drawing out what I have, so you know what you have there, and you put it all down. Basically, keep up with what you know. Just basically get necessities, food, gas, basic necessities that you need. That's what we do anyway. But if you look at the way it really works, it's got to go through the debit servers or credit servers. But if you use debit, it's going through, for example, MasterCard. MasterCard servers then have to approve it. Your bank has to then take that approval code and see if it matches the one that they send back. And if that chip code that it's created individually then on that terminal matches, then it's okayed. The merchant then, their bank, the merchant that you're buying from, their bank has to approve and say, yep, we're getting that transaction, we're getting the funds, sufficient funds are being transferred to us. And then the merchant's bank has to say okay and agree with those codes. The codes have to be, agreed back and forth between your bank and the merchant, the PIN pad. Then the card has to be approved through the MasterCard servers. So it goes through the MasterCard servers, through your bank and their servers, through the business itself on their terminal, and the business servers and their bank servers. It goes through all that when you just go put the card in and then type in your PIN or just put it in some places and it's done in milliseconds. And people go, come on, when it takes too long. We're so used to instantaneous, everything working instantaneously, that it's just, people don't think about how complex it is. They really don't. And then they have to do this, like Bitcoin works on which I wish oh my goodness, I wish I'd invested in Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. I think everyone does. But cryptocurrency, that's a whole other ball game. They do blockchain ledgers where, and then a digital transaction ID. Every time you use like, for example, if people use PayPal, if you have that in there, even if you're using their debit link with PayPal from the bank, it will create a digital, like a ledger showing that, proving the transaction, and then you'll get an email, and the email contains your transaction ID and details and the codes they created individually for each transaction and receipt, and it logs it that way through that method. And no one thinks about the complexity of how it is. It's instant. And I still like Cash. I love Cash. I feel like that it should be, if you have the liberty of having, you know, when you get Cash, it feels good to have it. I don't think we should go cashless completely at all. But, I also love technology, but I don't like the negativity they're using it for and where it's going. I know where it's going, but I'm fascinated by it at the same time. And the internet, though, it's just people don't think about how the internet works. They don't think about it, how complex it is. And I didn't do any tapping sounds or anything like that for this video. Just wanted to just talk a little bit about it, a little bit about the internet, a little bit about connectivity and all that kind of stuff. The interconnected world in which we live today. And whenever you think about this, just think about how complex it is. And the binary code, the sets of zeros and ones. Quantum computing, that's a whole other ballgame. Quantum computing, the supercomputers can solve complex equations that would take any other computer. It would have taken us 10,000 years to solve. Think about this. In 2015, I believe it was, around that year, a quantum supercomputer solved complex mathematical and scientific equations. It solved complex questions that would have taken anything, the world's smartest computers all working at the same time. 10,000 years. 10,000 years! It'll give you such a crick in the neck. Oi! You ain't never had a friend like me. Rest in peace, Robin Williams. Anyway, yeah. The genie of the lamp. But it would take them 10,000 years to solve. All the world's smartest supercomputers working at the same time would take 10,000 years to solve what that one quantum computer solved in less than 2 minutes back in 2015. So it's heading in a direction that we could not even fathom. Like, a lot of people don't think artificial intelligence is able to access everything. And see, binary code works in sets of zeros and ones. It is able to have one set of zeros and ones, maybe a 0 and a 1, or 0, 1, 1, 0, 0. Quantum computing works on a qubit level, a qubit or a quantum bit, and double sets of binary code, 2 sets of zeros and ones. And it's able to solve things at tremendously, unbelievably more in a complex manner. It's able to solve things in an unbelievable manner. Now, that's dangerous and also amazing at the same time. Like CERN and the Large Hadron Collider, trying to find when they've searched for the God particle and smashing atoms to understand the primordial or primordial soup, as they call it, primordial existence, the singularity, and trying to understand how before the existence of, well, the Big Bang, as they call it, or the existence of this universe, or even multiverse if you're into quantum mechanics or quantum physics, like I loved the thoughts of thinking of. But since I was little, I loved that. But that whole thing, people just don't think about how complex it is. Quantum computing is really complex, and I can't even understand it all. It's very, very, quantum physics, quantum mechanics is just something else. It gets into deeper, like time travel, and it gets into the whole thing of superposition, of being in more than one place at once, or basically teleportation, and all of those realms of possibilities. But really, if you break down your genetic coding in your body, and you break it down and then disassemble and reassemble somewhere else, is it really you anymore? That's the thing. That gets really, really, the ethics get really, as a spiritual believer in Christ, the ethics of certain things just kind of. But yeah, whole lot of things. Just so much fascinating information to cover. But just people don't think about the possible negative implications that are on the way of like the biometrics technology, the whether it's the recognition technology or biometrics. There's positive and negatives in all of that. I know many of us are struggling right now and going through some really rough times, tough times, but all these things also fascinate me, and I just thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about that and how a lot of it got started. Just like atoms are made of quartz and four smaller particles known as quartz, and then you go deeper into the subatomic particles, the micro quantum world that you can't see, encompassing the macro. By the way, the macro quantum world means everything that you can see. It's just, and we are made of stardust. We are made of space dust. We're made of the particles that, I mean, everything is one. It's just, it's amazing. But yeah, anyway, there's a lot to discuss, and if you'd like to hear more, let me know. So, all right, that's a little bit of history of the internet. That's a little bit of everything, just random things of technology, and just thought I'd share that. That's all for this video. Why am I holding this vape inhaler the entire time? Just sitting here holding that going, making sounds. Anyway, all right, peace. That's all for now.